Over a year ago, Nintendo reapplied for the NES Controller Patent, and a lot of people were wondering why that was. Were they just trying to protect their IP, or did they plan to do something more with it? Maybe release NES-style controllers for the Wii U at the time. Of course, that ended up translating into the NES Classic, which used that NES controller style, so that is why they did the patent for the NES controller. Earlier this year, Nintendo did the same thing with the SNES controller design, and people started thinking, well, maybe they're doing an SNES Classic Edition. And I thought maybe it was a bit too soon, but Nintendo surprised us all and stealthily announced that the SNES Classic would be coming out this September. So Nintendo reapplied a patent for the NES controller and released the NES Classic. Nintendo reapplied the SNES controller patent and is now releasing the SNES Classic. Well, today, Nintendo has just redone the patent for the N64 controller. So what does this mean? I think it's pretty damn obvious, folks. We're getting the Virtual Boy Classic Edition. Enjoy all 14 North American titles on one sleek device. Red and Black is back, baby. It's the Red and Black attack. No, we're getting the N64 Classic Edition. So let's talk about when we should probably expect to see this, what sort of games are going to be on there, and why exactly Nintendo is probably doing this. So the most interesting thing to me about the Classic Edition library is how it sort of counteracts with the Virtual Console, because unlike the Virtual Console, these games are much cheaper. When you look at a per dollar game, even if you're just looking at, don't even include the hardware, the fact that the hardware has to cost money to make. With the NES Classic, games were about, what, $2 a piece? There was, 30 games on the system. It was a $60 system, so games were $2 a pop, which is more than the $5 you spend on the Virtual Console. When you look at the Super Nintendo, there are less games, but they're higher quality games, and they still come in at about, $4 a pop, not including hardware and controller that comes with it, just strictly talking about the games. So it's pretty interesting how it sort of deviates from their more highly priced Virtual Console aspect, but it's supposed to be sort of in line with that. And with the Switch, we still have no Virtual Console announcement and whatnot, so it's interesting to see how Nintendo is sort of pushing these into a different direction, trying to grab maybe a different part of the marketplace, but not really focusing on the Virtual Console. But the task at hand here is, of course, the N64 Classic Edition. Is it happening? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. It won't be this year, obviously. Obviously, this is the year of the Super Nintendo, but I think it'll be a bit sooner than holiday season for next year. I'm thinking more of a summer release for the N64 Classic Edition, just because if they're doing the patent now, and if you look at the time frame between the NES patent and the NES Classic, the Super Nintendo Controller Patent and the Super Nintendo Classic, it's definitely pretty early for them to be doing this. So it could just be a long-term plan for something for next year, but I think you're going to see this a bit sooner. And what's interesting about the N64 Classic Edition is that this is the first time a lot of these games are going to be able to be played in a natural state in sort of an HD on your television set, because none of the clone consoles that upscale to HD play N64 games. So unless you have your N64 modded or you're using an emulator on your computer, you've never had these N64 games in HD. So I'm pretty excited to see some of these games on there. As for what sort of games to expect, you're going to see the standards. You're going to see the Super Mario. You're going to see Ocarina of Time on there. You're going to see all the classics. I think the surprise game will be Sin and Punishment, though. That was a Japanese exclusive that never saw an English translation. It was released on the Wii Virtual Console. I'm not sure if it was released on the Wii U Virtual Console, but I know it was released on the Wii Virtual Console, and I think that would be a fun game to add to the collection. Now, how many games do I expect on there? Probably around the SNES Classic number, that 20-ish range, because let's face it, there wasn't that many great third-party games on the N64 compared to the Super Nintendo or the NES. It was definitely more of a Nintendo-driven system. So as far as, those third-party games that you see on, the Super Nintendo Classic and the NES Classic, do you really want Castlevania 64 on there? No, you don't, because you have taste in video games. But I think it's going to be very interesting. One thing I really want Nintendo to do, though, and this makes perfect sense to me, and I don't know why they aren't doing something like this, is you have this physical form here. You have this physical product for people that want a physical product of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. And of course the N64 Classic Edition, which will be releasing next year more than likely. Why don't you take all those games that you have a license for now and put them on a single Switch cartridge and sell it for $60? And play it on your Switch. Like, that would be so awesome. Think about taking N64 games portably with you. That hasn't been done, you know, well, unless you have a, you know, DIY N64 portable or you have an emulation machine, but even the emulation machines, some of those things struggle with the N64. It would be so cool to have these collections all on one cartridge. And I'm not sure why Nintendo doesn't try to pursue this, but yes, the NES Classic came after the NES Controller Patent. The Super Nintendo Classic came after the Super Nintendo Controller Patent. So more than likely, folks, the N64 is on the horizon. You're gonna see it next year, and I'm pretty excited for it. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. Definitely the HD aspects are going to be the best thing about that, because N64 games are gonna look really interesting in HD. Let me know what you think about this situation, if the N64 Classic Edition will be coming out next year, in the comments section down below. Thank you for checking out this video. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and I'll catch you guys next time. Later.
RGT, NA5, RGT, NA5. RGT, NA5.